Hi everybody. This is a VR to Piper Downs on his 100 Gore giveaway. One that he very well deserves his followers. He deserves a lot more people following him, to be honest. He's very knowledgeable about tobacco, knows what he likes, says what he thinks, and is interesting to follow. I almost sort of feel like a spiritual step-grandfather to him, or stepfather, in that I gave him a shout-out quite early on, and you all responded to that, so I hope you'll respond again to him. Now, first of all, my housekeeping. I'm smoking a Savinelli. Now, let me have a look at it. Oh dear. Well, it's number 606 shape, and I can't see it, I'm sorry. I should have looked it up more and remembered. And in it, I've got Oriental Dream, made by my son Tim. It's one that I go to sort of quite regularly when I just want to have a nice little smoke. And this is the first time I've smoked this pipe, so it seemed nice to have a tobacco that I knew. If you look at that stuff, it's beautiful. It's one that I'm really going to enjoy having, I think. It was sent by an anonymous Yabo donor. If you remember, we had a Yabo, Tim and I, which we shared. Right, now back to the VR. What was our worst job? It's quite difficult as this for me, because during my early working life, just after marriage, I had a massive breakdown. So, it was difficult to tell which was the illness and which was work. But when I left school, I worked in a tailor's shop, a shop called Greenwood's, which was a men's wear shop, quite a well-known one in the north of England, which I see has now gone underground, gone sort of collapsed financially. Sorry, I'm having trouble keeping this alight. I'll have to get used to it a bit more. And then I worked in sort of several other tailors, including a firm called Hepworth's, which was quite a well-known tailors in England. It was a very good tailors. It was a nice firm to work for. But if ever you went to the factory, you were warned never to walk through the women's section by yourself as a young man. And one of my friends made that mistake, and where the clothes came out on the conveyor belt, a shoe came out, and then another shoe, and then a tie, and then a shirt, and so on, until this naked young man came out, looking very embarrassed and crying his eyes out. The women had given him a rough time, really. Women factory workers can be quite, how can I put this, quite strong when they're together. They're quite dangerous as well, far more dangerous than men in a factory. I then went on to work for a firm called Soil Pipes, which was a bit of a difficult job in one way. It was I used to take boxes of plastic pipes out to the women, and they would then trim them, and then I would go and collect them and put them in the storeroom. There was an Italian lady there. She taught me to say the most obscene things in Italian. So when we went out, we'd start swearing at each other in Italian. I'm not going to use the words that she taught me. It's a long time ago, and she was a lovely girl. I mean, she really was. She was great fun. The only trouble was that the firm was owned by some Italian Americans, and they came over to look round to see how the factory was getting on. And we were rather surprised to see this young punk in full flow telling this young lady what she could do. And the foreman came down when they'd left and said, "I'm sorry, Stephen, you're fired. You were seen swearing and using bad language to the women, swearing in Italian." Well, the girl involved sort of immediately went to the management and said, "Look, this wasn't anything like you think. It was something that we always do. In fact, I taught you to swear in Italian. It was just a bit of fun." But unfortunately, I'd gone round collecting for the person who was leaving. I thought, I'm leaving, somebody's leaving, so it seems only right to get a collection for them. So I went round with a box saying to everybody, "Are you giving to the leaving present?" Went to the managing director, said, "Would you like to give to the leaving present?" And he said, "Yes, who's leaving?" And I said, "I am, I've just been fired." And he said, "Are you Waters?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "We were going to give you your job back, but if that's the kind of young man you are, we don't want you working for us." So I thought, oh well, never mind. And it was those kind of days where you could go out and get another job straight away. So I left and went down to a firm called Garnett's, which was a paper maker. And out of all the jobs I've had, that really was one of the worst. It was a very dangerous factory. We had virtually an accident a shift, minor accidents, and maybe a serious accident every week. To give you an idea how safety conscious this firm was, we had a closed off section that had chlorine in it. Chlorine gas bottles. Now this was locked, and such was their knowledge of safety, the gas mask was inside on one of the bottles. So, you can imagine it. You get a leak in there, the room's full of chlorine, you unlock the door because you've got to go in and change a cylinder or something, and the gas mask's over the other side of the room. Great sense. The reason I left that firm is because I had a young lad in his late teens who worked on a machine that I was running. And his job was to take all the waste paper, put it into a big wooden box, push that under the press, and then tie the bale up and take it outside. Unfortunately, the paper got stuck at the top, so he climbed up and was jumping up and down to get the paper below the level of the press when he fell out of the box and struck his head. The first aid man said, "Well, he's just feeling sorry for himself. He's just bumped his head. We'll put him in the first aid room, and I'll call in and see him in a few minutes." In the meantime, they'd put him in the room, and there was a crash in the room, and when they went in, he'd fallen on the floor off the bed, and he was doubly incontinent. He bled into the brain and had serious brain damage. The paper mill said that he bled into the brain, that's what made him fall. We said he fell and struck his head, that's what made him bleed into the brain. His poor mother got a gun from somewhere and came down to the factory looking for the managing director and the staff, and intending to get payback time. Luckily, I managed to get the gun off her because she'd come to see me because he was on my machine. And I gave that to my father of the chapel in Union. Our Union office was called the chapel because it was the way things were then. And eventually the firm were taken to court and they gave her a total of £400 to look after her son for the rest of her life. And I thought, what happens if I fall? I'd had several accidents, including, you might be able to see one just here. So I sort of left, which, you know, I wasn't going to stay any longer. Well, I was partly thrown out as well, because I publicly objected to the way this young lad had been treated. And then somebody from a garden centre came to give me a job. It was a lovely place to work, was the garden centre, but some of the jobs were very hard. And this is the one that had the worst of all jobs that I can think of. Not the most dangerous, I mean, there are more dangerous jobs. But this one was, we had a field of rose stocks waiting to be, buds to be put on them. And to do that, you had a collection of sort of little buds that you'd cut into a specific shape, the tea cut, and you slip them behind it, and then you wrap them with raffia so that the bud took. To do that, you had to bend over. So you'd start at one end of a row and you'd be bent over, putting about 5 or 6 buds on each plant until you got to the other end of the row when you stood up. Now you can imagine what that's like. You know, a row of God knows how many roses. And you'd go down and tie all these things off. But we were lucky. We got a team in from Denmark, and these men spent all their day just doing that, just budding the roses. They were phenomenal workers. They literally would bend over, get to the end of the row, stand up, turn round, and go back down the row. Some of them never even stood up for hour after hour while they did this. I mean, their backs must have been made of steel or whatever, but it must have been very, very painful at the end of the day. And they all smoked, and they all had clenchers that they clenched into their mouths, and the only time they stopped was for a toilet break or a midweek, a meal break, or to, like, you know, to stoke up the pipes. And you'd see them going down the row with the smoke going out of their pipes. And that's really the worst job, and I'm glad I didn't have to do it. I say I haven't really had bad jobs, you know, the worst jobs, but that's not true. I mean, the paper mill was a terrible job with so many accidents, and I had 3 or 4 accidents. But the type of class I came from, I was a working class lad. I mean, you wouldn't have liked me when I worked in the paper mill. If you think that I use sort of bad jokes now and sometimes bad language, there every other word was a swear word. There the men were as tough as hell, and the only time they ever slackened that toughness is if somebody got hurt. Then if somebody really got hurt, they would gather round and help as much as they could, even holding the man, putting their arm round him, not minding if he was crying, and sort of really helping him and showing a very gentle side. But as soon as the rush was over, you could see them sort of toughen up again and not wanting to be thought as being anywhere near at fault. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I've gone on too long. I just want to say again, that Piper Downs deserves his 100 plus. I'm just trying to think of a suitable joke. No, I think my mind's gone blank. I shall have to think of one for the next thing I put up. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I've thought of a joke. There was this Scottish church, a wee free church, Church of Scotland, which was very, very strict. And the priest was a hellfire preacher. And one day he was away in the spirit, preaching to the people. And he said, there'll come a day when the good Lord will look down upon you and condemn you to the fires of hell. And when he does so, you'll say, Lord, I didna ken. And the good Lord, in his infinite love and mercy, will look down and say, well, I kenna noo.